All right, so we have open forum. If anybody would like to bring questions or Q&A, Father Deacon and I and the other mods are here. So is anybody in the chat? Any challengers? Any questions? Any topics? Bring it forth. We're here. I even have my white boy whiteboard right here. Right here. Got my whiteboard.
Yeah. I had a quick question. Someone mentioned on your last stream about God being pure act in the incarnation, how that it's an issue, it's problematic, and you said that something along the lines of how if he's always actualizing everything and he's actualizing one hypostasis, why isn't he actualizing the other two, right? Could a Roman Catholic counter that by saying that he can't actualize the other two because it's logically impossible?
No, the argument is not that he's actualizing other persons. The argument is that a being that is pure act has to have something other than himself or itself to actualize. That's what in Aristotle the word means. So Aristotle believes that the first cause is a first actualizer. He's pure energy, pure action. So there's always something other than himself. Now, the reason that we don't apply that argument necessarily, you could make an argument about generating of the sun, right? Because if God is pure act, then what is the distinction between generating and spirating? There would be a real distinction in the Trinity, right? But this is just to speak of God in essence, definitionally, God via substance as pure act. And the problem is that in Aristotelian philosophy, pure act means that he's eternally pure act. He's always pure act. To act means to actualize. He's not actualizing himself. So Aristotle said he's always actualizing the other, something other than himself. So the argument is not about other persons. It could be, but it's not about that. It's about creation. Aristotle believes that there's an eternal prima materia, prime matter, that the first actualizer is eternally actualizing. Does that make sense?
Yes, because if that's what he is by definition, it's gonna necessitate him actualizing something
from all eternity.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's never a time when he wasn't actualizing creation, and then he changed to become the actualizer of creation. That would mean, if that happened, that would mean he has potentia. And in Roman Catholic theology, in terms of especially Thomism, but generally speaking in Roman Catholic theology, God has absolutely no potentia, no active or passive potentia in any sense at all, period. That's why Basil says in Hexameron 2 that Aristotle's argument is stupid. Because if God is an eternal actualizer as a first principle, then he must have a second principle that he always actualizes. So there's a necessary relationship between the actualizer and what he actualizes, between God and creation. That's an eternal creation. This is not my argument. It's just Basil's argument in Hexameron 2. He says Aristotle's stupid because he has a dyad. So that's why it's two persons, is because the material world that the first actualizer is eternal actualizing is itself another eternal principle. So Basil says, well, that's basically a two-headed God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, but I thought that the idea of him being pure act causes problems for the incarnation. I thought someone mentioned
that. Right, it does,
does,
because how does one hypostasis enter into a mode of being that the other two do not?
Yeah, and that's where I was going to ask, could they counter that by saying that the other two can't enter into a mode of being because it's logically impossible or something?
Why would it be logically impossible for the Father and the Spirit to do it, but not the Son? I mean, I don't understand how that's even a coherent argument. It just sounds like it sounds like an ad hoc rescue. The problem is with the doctrine of simplicity and then with the doctrine of pure act. They're defining God in essence as pure act. St. Maximus does not define God in his essence as pure act. He defines God as pure act in contrast to creatures, but in essence we do not know what he is. So they collapse the two distinctions. They collapse economia into theology proper. Do you understand?
Yes.
And yes, you could take the pure act simplicity argument will apply to any level of distinctions in God. if you wanted to, right? So in other words, we could apply it to the distinction between generating and spirating. Is that a real distinction? Sure. Okay. Then is it something that's in the essence? How is God pure act if there's two different things going on in God?
Right. And then their other doctrine of absolute divine simplicity probably doesn't even allow for distinction.
What do you mean their other doctrine?
Well, if God is absolutely simple, how can he have distinctions within himself, right?
Right. So in other words, modal collapse argument does point out problems in any attempt to make distinctions in God that are only virtual, nominal, or conceptual. Okay.
Right.
The distinction between generating and spirating is not virtual, it's not nominal, it's not conceptual. It is, but it's you can conceptually distinguish because it's really distinguished. This is the whole paper kat epinoia that Bradshaw has. So can we make a conceptual distinction between generating and spirating in our minds? Yes. How can we do that? Basil says, because it's a real distinction. What your mind is predicating on the basis of what's really distinct. Because there is a real distinction between generating and spirating, you can really distinguish those things in your mind. And some distinctions are purely conceptual, right? The distinction between bachelor and unmarried man is a conceptual distinction. There's not a real distinction in reality between those two things, right? But in our mind, we can distinguish them linguistically. But there is a real distinction between the Son and the Spirit, because there's a real distinction between generating and spirating. Okay, so is that an action of the essence or an action of the persons? Well, it's an action of the person of the Father. That's why you have to begin your Trinitarian theology not with the essence of God, but with the person of the Father. And that's what the Cappadocians do. So the Roman Catholics just simply don't accept Constantinople I and the Cappadocian teaching. And they think they do. They can say all day long that they do. But in fact, they don't. I'm almost done with this whole PhD thesis on that very topic. Right? Basil of Caesarea, Gregory of Nyssa, and the transformation of divine simplicity. The whole book, the whole PhD thesis is about the fact that the Cappadocian doctrine of divine simplicity and distinctions in the Trinity is different from the Augustinian, Latin, Anselmian, Thomistic West. Well, yeah. I mean, why is this even controversial? It's like, how many? I mean, we had medieval councils called the Palamite councils that already told us this 1,000 years ago. So we shouldn't even have to debate this 800 years ago. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else in Discord? Anybody else next up?
Yeah. Is it cool if I ask Father Deacon a question on his interpretation of Scripture real quick, or
sure.
is that not?
No.
Okay. Father Deacon, I'm an Inquirer, by the way, so this is just a question.
Hi. Yeah.
In Mark 1:9-11, it says, after the Christ is baptized, it says, a voice came down from heaven. And I was just wondering if Jesus was the Word. I know that the Father was talking to him, because it says the Spirit also descended upon him like a dove. So if Christ is the Word, how was the Father talking to him, if that makes sense?
So this is Mark
1:9-11. It's right after the Christ is baptized, or when he's being baptized.
Well, something that I'd actually say is, as far as I understood it, it was the Father who actually speaks. Just because Christ is the Word, I don't think that permits God the Father from speaking. So it's Mark 1.
9-11. That was just kind of my question, was that so the Father can speak. It's not only Christ who can speak from the heavens.
It's also divine action, so it
Right.
will be from the Father through the Son in the Spirit, and that's also maybe why all of them are present.
Right. So one thing that is important to remember is that not every referent to an action is identical to a hypostasis. So sometimes the scriptures speak of different actions, or they will refer to different persons of the Trinity under different energies or actions or attributes. For example, in Ezekiel, we saw the Son being referred to as the glory of God. Now, the person of the Son is not identical to the glory of God, because the glory of God is something shared between Father, Son, and Spirit. But the Son has a unique way or role or mode that he manifests the glory of God, and this is the doctrine of energetic manifestation or energetic procession. So every energy of God is common to all three persons. However, the persons have a unique mode or tropos by which they manifest that energy. So for example, in creating of the world is a unique Trinitarian action. However, each person in the Trinity has a unique role in actualizing that action. So the Father is the origin of creation. The Son is the arche or principle through which creation comes to be. And the Spirit is the perfecter, the mover
rests on the Son, yeah.
of the created order. And like
we have this word perichoresis, just literally just it's like a inner dance, but it's the sharing of these actions or properties within the Trinity.
Okay, so they all have the same will. They just have different modes of enacting that
Correct.
will, per se?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thanks, guys.
So just like in redemption, right? Redemption is a Trinitarian work or action, but the persons have unique roles in the process or action of redeeming us. So for example, the Father's role is not to become incarnate. The Father's role is to send the Son. Right? Jesus always refers to this, especially in the Gospel of John, right? The Father sent me, blah, blah, blah. The Son's role is to take on human nature, right? To become incarnate. And then the Spirit's role is to save, sanctify, deify, etc.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so remember that role or mode is very, very important both to triadology and Christology. That's not modalism. Modalism is a triadological heresy that unite or that identifies all the persons. But tropos or mode is crucial to Trinitarian and Christological formulations because all mode is talking about how a thing is. So remember that person answers the question of who, nature answers the question of what, and mode answers the question of how a thing is. So the mode of the Trinity is different in theology proper versus economia. This is why we don't read economia back into Trinitarian theology proper.
And all the modes just go back to, right, it was created by the Father through the Son, or I forget the saying. I'm new to the whole Orthodox.
Right, so this comes from St. Basil. Basil's dictum is from the Father through the Son and in the Spirit. And that's a liturgical refrain that gets adopted and becomes kind of the norm for Trinitarian formulations all the way up into St. Gregory Palamas in the Middle Ages. So basically nothing in Trinitarian theology after the Second Ecumenical Council, everything's pretty much settled for the East. There's a little bit of debate in early Byzantium about Trinitarian formulations about the offering of the Son in the liturgy. Thine own of thy own. There's actually a early Byzantine debate about that, what that means. But aside from that, up into the Trinitarian theology doesn't get debated again or stated again until the Palamite synods. And the Palamite synods clarify further post-Constantinople I what the meaning of the plane of hypostatic origins is, distinct from the plane of energetic procession, distinct from the plane of economia. So crucial to understanding Orthodox Trinitarian theology is these three planes, Plane, of Trinitarian existence or reality. This is from St. Gregory Palamas. The first plane is where we begin our Trinitarian theology, hypostatic origin, the person of the Father as the sole cause. And the person of the Father is the sole cause of the generating of the Son and the spirating of the Spirit. That's the only way that we consistently, through then a relation of origins, right, and relation of persons, distinguish the Trinitarian, the hypostases of the Trinity. The second plane of Trinitarian theology, which is not really present in Roman Catholic theology, is energetic manifestation. We have a crucial doctrine of the energies that is necessary 100% to our Trinitarian theology. This is one of the reasons why the Tomos and the Palamite synods of the Middle Ages reject filioque, is because we do not collapse the things that we're saying about energetic manifestation into hypostatic origin. And the Roman Catholics do that, and that's why they believe in filioque. They don't have this level of distinction that we possess, where we distinguish the eternal energetic procession or manifestation of the actions of God or the Holy Spirit from the Father through the Son in the Spirit, right? That's distinct from hypostatic origin, and it's distinct. It's related to economic procession, but it's distinct from the economia. Then we have economic procession, the third level, right, of the role of the Son in creation and the role of the Holy Spirit in creation. And economia, Trinity in time and space and history and redemption, you can't read that back into Trinity proper, meaning the first two layers, the first two planes. Palamas uses the phrase planes of existence in the Trinity. It's not saying that there's different Trinities. It's just making distinctions in the Trinity.
By the way, that's a super stupid argument to say that economia needs to perfectly reflect theology,
right?
Because otherwise there wouldn't be no economy and theology. And everything you said, like, it's actually straight from Irenaeus, so that's from like 2nd century.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
Also, the idea of the Spirit, being perfecter and stuff. This is very early.
Yeah, I should add this. I didn't want to give the impression that Basil invented it. Basil just made it basically part of the liturgy. So,
and then the filioque just undercuts all three planes that Palamas presented. That's why we know that the filioque is...
well, it doesn't undercut all of the three planes, because most Roman Catholics at least make a distinction between theology proper and economia, but they don't understand or typically see why we make a distinction between hypostatic origin and energetic manifestation. So they will say, look, filioque, when Basil or when John Damascus, when they talk, or Athanasius, when they talk about the manifestation of the Spirit through the Son, that's no different than filioque. It all means the same thing. No, it doesn't, because Roman Catholic theology does not have a clear energies doctrine. We do. You can see this in Athanasius. This is why I tell people ad nauseum to read the Florovsky paper on Athanasius and creation, because Florovsky shows that Athanasius teaches the essence energy distinction. And one way he does that is to distinguish between things that God does in the intra-Trinitarian life, right? Like generating a son or manifesting his glory. And those are distinct from the actions that relate to the created order, like providence or creating, right? God is not eternally provident. He's eternally provident in the sense of having the potentiality or the power, but he's not eternally actualizing providence. This is, again, we go back to the modal collapse problem, right? If God is pure act, then is he eternally, purely actualizing providence? Oh, okay, well then there's an eternal creation over which he's provident. But no, Roman Catholic actually professes that, right? So again, it's a little more nuanced than that they're collapsing all of the three planes of existence in the Trinity into one. But they're confusing the first and second plane, and they don't see why there's a problem or why you need an energies doctrine. And they simply depart from the first 7 councils, because the 7 councils hinge multiple arguments on the essence energy distinction. So their theology, their Trinitarian theology, is all jacked up. That's the point.
Perfect. Thank you so much, man.
Yes, sir.
We do have a Muslim who said that he has to go soon. He had 2 quick questions he wanted to ask if we have time for that.
Okay, we'll do the Muslim, and then we'll do Reformed Stoic, who's ready here to expose us all as KGB. So go ahead, Mr. Muslim.
That's Fred Douglas.
Yeah.
A Muslim named Frederick Douglass.
My question is real quick. Just can you come to the conclusion that a God exists without using the Bible? That's one of my questions.
In one sense, we would say that there is an inner intuitive sense that all men have, according to Romans 1, in their heart of hearts, or their nous, that there is a God and that we have offended against him, and that we're guilty because we have the law of God on our heart. So that's what I think Paul is saying in Romans 1. But if you mean through rational deduction of looking at the natural world, do we do this natural theology exercise to getting back to a first cause? Some people might do that, but whether they can give an account for that is a different question, and I don't think they can.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, can you gain salvation without full knowledge of the Trinity in this day and age?
Well, we don't believe that, quote, full knowledge of the Trinity is a purely rational exercise. So it's not like you got to go get a THD to be saved, because, you know, we believe that there's infants who are going to be saved, right? And this is partly why we baptize infants. And we don't think that everybody who is in the church has to attain, you know, a high level of intellectual capacity to be saved. I mean, you can have slow boys that get saved. I'm sure there will be plenty of slow boys who are saved and plenty of theologians who are damned. So there is, at least from God's perspective, I mean, and God knows this, you know, some degree of knowledge that is applicable to whom much is given, much is required, is what the way I would put it. So when Jesus is asked this question in the Gospels, he kind of says, to the degree that you have been gifted, that is the degree to which you will have, you know, you will be judged on the basis of that requirement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Doug ate the mic.
Here we go. My mic's broken. Our Discord has the amazing power to completely obliterate every microphone. Have you noticed that? Literally nobody's microphone works in our Discord, and it's purely a
check.
Uh-oh.
I'm here?
You're here.
Let's go! Let's get it, Jay. Hey, I'm a big fan, by the way, first of all.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet you are. Sure.
And second of all, I never said anything about KGB. I just said CIA, bro.
Yeah, that was.
You're trying to group me in with other people. I'm a lone wolf.
That was
Wolfgang.
That was my joke.
You ever heard of Intrepid Corp? Lance Cottrell? I exposed them on my channel, man. He was dressing up like a mailman in my neighborhood. Isn't that nuts?
All right, are you a troll? Are you a troll? Or are you here to debate?
Well, you remember?
I don't know. I have no idea who you're talking. Right? I don't know who you. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about. You can have
Southern Israelite. Well, you and Southern Israelite debated, correct? You do remember that, right?
Yeah.
No. Okay, well, I exposed him as a CIA.
I don't care who you've exposed. Do you have a topic to dude? Nobody cares about your channel and your nobody cares about your channel and your exposés. Do you have an argument?
Well, that's not an argument. That's the deflection.
Do you have an argument?
Let's talk about CIA handlers, Jay. My argument is that you have CIA handlers.
Okay,
and it's very
and where is
ironic
the
when
proof?
you talk
Where
about-
is the proof of
when
this?
you talk about people giving like a little bit of information and not really giving anything relevant to right now. That's exactly what your channel does, Jay.
Okay, so how is that a proof? How is that a proof?
Let's get it. Well, here's a proof. You do not have to be Orthodox to get saved. That's for sure. You just got to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Okay, this guy is a fad or a troll. This guy's not even. This guy's a troll. Just delete this guy. It's a total waste of time.
I'm a John 3:16 Christian, Jay. Let's get
He's
it.
laughing because he knows that what he's saying is disingenuous. He can't even make an argument. So total waste of time. So there you go. That's the quality. The quality of our opponents is so low tier that all he can do is like, I don't even know what that was. Fed speak? Like, what was that?
Did anybody hear what church he was in?
He's probably not even in a church, dude. That's probably not even.
He's not part of a
Total
church,
clown.
No, he said in my DMs, he said he's invisible church. So I just
so
the Protestant role.
just a total clown. Anyway, let's move on. Anybody have any good actual arguments or positions that they want to put forward? We got a couple super chats. Bantu says,
I just have a question.
Yeah.
You know how you said there was a debate over thine own?
Uh-huh.
Could you say what the position was settled on? What that means?
I brought it up with Seraphim. It's like the end of the second chapter in Mindorf. So it's kind of a confusing thing. I'll get the book here in a second, but do you guys want to take over? I'm going to run to the little boys' room.
So maybe we should just explain to people what that is. There's a part in the liturgy where the priest or the deacon holds up the chalice and plate, holy plate. It says, "Thine own of thine own, we offer to thee." Are you guys familiar with that part?
On behalf of all and for all.
Yeah, and for all.
Mm.
But I'm not familiar about like what the what the debate is over? Lewis, do you know?
No, but I've always found it kind of like you could interpret that in so many different ways. Like it could just be about the elements, but it could also be about Christ, like the Son being the Father's own, being offered to the Father. That's probably what they settled on, but it's kind of like it's kind of ambiguous. So I wanted to know what the settled view was on
elements as far as the bread and wine, or like the
I got it right here. So there's
yeah, as in like it's God's creation that we're offering back to Him, kind of thing. Like that's the other thought I had. Maybe that's what it means.
Does it have to be an either or too?
It's the offering of the Son. So here's the debate, and you'll see how it applies to refuting the Protestant purely juridical notion. So it's pages 39 and 40 of the Meindorf book. So let me read this. It gets a little confusing, so let's see if we can parse this out. He says, the very Cyrillian conclusion of the council against Eustrasius led to further Christological debates, which this time concerned the meaning of the Eucharistic sacrifice. The deacon Soterikos Pantuginos, the patriarch-elect of Antioch, affirmed that the sacrifice could not be offered to the Holy Trinity, for this would imply that the one Christ performs two opposing actions, the human action of offering, the divine action of receiving. And this would mean a Nestorian separation and personalization of two natures. Okay, so we got that point that far, right?
Interesting.
And then it goes on to say, where did I leave off? Nicholas, the bishop of Methone in Peloponnese, was a major Byzantine theologian of the 12th century, and he responded to Soterikos with an elaboration on the notion of hypostasis based on Leontius of Byzantium and Maximus the Confessor. The hypostatic union is precisely what permits one to consider God as performing humanly the act of offering, while maintaining that God by nature and therefore receiving the sacrifice. To Soterikos, Nicholas opposed the conclusion of the prayer of the Cherubicon, whose author, as modern research shows, is none other than Cyril of Alexandria himself. But what is part of both Byzantine liturgies and attributed to Basil and Chrysostom is the words, "For it is thou who offerest and who art offered, who receivest and art thyself received." Nicholas, whose views were endorsed by the Council of 1156 to 57, shows that neither the Eucharist nor the work of Christ in general can be reduced to a purely juridical notion of sacrifice conceived as an exchange. God does not have to receive anything from us. We do not go to him to make an offering. Rather, he condescends towards us, assumes our nature, not as a condition of reconciliation, but in order to meet us openly in the flesh. Thus, you can see how this refutes the Protestant doctrine of the purely juridical transaction. Does that make sense?
It's quite complicated, I must say. You were right.
And then it goes on to say, the very technical Christological discussions of the 12th century reconsider all the major issues which have been debated in the 5th and 6th and 7th. The Byzantine Church remained fundamentally faithful to what Father Florovsky calls asymmetrical Christology, the union of God and man in Christ. The hypostatic source of all life is divine. The mankind is not diminished, but in fact becomes fully human. The notion of asymmetrical Christology is thus expressed in the Eucharistic sacrifice, which is a unique act in which no single action of Christ is represented in isolation or reduced to any purely human concepts, such as a purely juridical, he's saying, exchange or satisfaction. Christ, as the Synodicon says every Sunday of Orthodoxy, reconciles us to himself by means of the whole mystery of the economy, by himself, in himself, and thus reconciles us to his God and Father, and of course to the most holy, life-giving Spirit. So in other words, there's no sense at all in which there's a human subject that is offering something to the Son or to the Trinity. That's the key here. In other words, this dispute is a further reaffirmation of asymmetrical Christology, that Christ is a divine hypostasis, and there's no human subject that is part of this transaction and change and offering. The humanity is the humanity of the divine person of the Word that he offers to the Father, you see. Does that make sense?
So they sided with the first Antiochian deacon that it's not referring to offering to the whole Trinity. Is that right?
Let me restate that part. It's a deacon, Deacon Soterikos, who affirmed that sacrifice could not be offered to the Trinity, for this would imply that the one Christ performs two opposing actions, a human action of offering and a divine action of receiving, and this would be Nestorian. But the response is that the hypostatic union is precisely what permits one to consider God as performing humanly the action of offering. So it's that he entered into the mode of humanity. It's not a human person offering, it's the divine Son offering the humanity. Does that make sense? So in other words, he is the offerer and the receiver.
It's in the Synodicon as well, by the way.
Yeah, that's why it cites the Synodicon of saying that he proclaims that Christ reconciles us to himself by means of the whole mystery of the economia, by himself, in himself, to his God and our Father, and to the Spirit.
Oh yeah, because it's en hypostaton in him in a unique mode.
Exactly. So this is where mode becomes crucial. But if you look at it, this was the point I was making to Seraphim Hamilton in our discussion, which is that even the liturgy, if you were to follow it out, the theology of the liturgy, you would see that it refutes the Protestant reductionist notion of making it a juridical, theoretical bank account transaction. It's impossible with correct Trinitarian theology to have that view. That's the point here.
Perfect, thanks.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Who's next?
It's me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Muslim, by the way.
You what?
I interacted mainly with Orientals on Discord, so I might get a different answer from you. But would you say that being uncaused is a property of the essence or the Father only?
It's a hypostatic property. The Father is uncaused.
I think this is a better position than what I've heard from Orientals.
Yeah, well, Oriental theology is jacked up, so yeah.
Because it would sort of imply contradiction. The Son cannot be both uncaused and caused, begotten.
Correct. He is not autotheos, right? He is of the Father. And the original Nicene Creed and Nicene teaching is that he is divine because he is begotten.
Yeah, also another question. Do you affirm that God has one act?
No, the only time it's used by Saint Maximus and it's used by John Damascus, and Maximus is very clear in the 200 chapters that the only time that we say God is, quote, pure act is in contrast to creatures. In himself, in his essence, in the inner Trinitarian life, God is not pure act. He's clear as day. The first 5 pages of the 200 chapters says this. And John Damascus is not saying anything different. And again, I did a whole talk in Montana on the absurdities of saying that God is pure act in himself.
Okay. Can you, which video in particular? Because I want to watch it.
The lecture in Montana.
Okay, I'm going to watch
it. So it's...
Anyway, thanks for...
it's available for purchase through Jay's.
So you can watch the first half. It's...
Oh, that's right. That's right. First half.
It's called Roman Catholicism, Islam, and Greek Philosophical Presuppositions, Montana Lecture, J. Dyer. So it's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 videos back.
Thank you for the response.
Sure. My pleasure. Thank you. Hello, Discord. Hello, hello. Is there anybody in there? Just not if you can hear me.
Hey, Jay.
Uh-huh.
My name is Odin Benitez, and this isn't a challenge or anything. I just want to thank you for really kind of bringing me to orthodoxy. I'm in the process of doing it. I'm a supervising sound editor in Hollywood, and I've been working in the industry for 30 years. I may have some insights, into Hollywood and their ideology.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
Yeah, it's like, the whole, everybody kind of grows up with this. It's a huge echo chamber. But I'm sort of like you. I was baptized Catholic. I went to a Baptist high school, went to college, became a liberal Christian, got introduced to Gnosticism, was really fascinated by that, by the Gospel of Thomas, and read a bunch of books until I realized it was Satanism, basically.
Right.
And I kind of went back then to Roman Catholicism, just because I did a lot of investigation on the historical Jesus, and I thought that the Catholic scholars were the best up at that point. But I wasn't really introduced to any of the Eastern Fathers, and it's really odd because I did a lot of studying of Byzantium because I wrote a script about the fall of Constantinople.
Oh, cool.
And I read like 4 different contemporary accounts, and I read all of the John Julius Norwich books. The interesting thing is, though, that I never was really exposed to any of the theology. I think even Norwich just said something along the lines about he didn't really understand what the difference is between Orthodoxy and Catholicism is, something about the energies of Christ.
Yeah.
And so for me, this is really illuminating because I'm somewhat of a amateur scholar about Byzantium. I even wrote 2 chapters in a military history book about some battles that occurred with the Byzantine Empire.
Awesome. That's crazy.
Yeah, so for me, this is sort of like, it's almost like providence. I've studied so much of the Byzantine history, never really understanding the theology, and so I'm making my way through Byzantine theology, that book, and also some Father Seraphim books. Read Nihilism, which is just, it's a short book, but it took me forever to get through because each sentence is so thought provoking. But I just wanted to thank you, and I've found a church out here, and I'm in the process of, once I get through this Byzantine theology, I want to contact the priest, and I've been to Vespers already.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. I know that we are in the process right now of converting Hugh Jackman, Mel Gibson. No, I'm joking. I'm just joking.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what? My cousin actually drove with. He was Mel Gibson's driver, and before the whole thing, his idea about the resurrection, he and Mel were partying, and Mel got kind of close to him and said, I've got this idea about making a movie about the resurrection. I think that's the next film.
Cool. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I think that's going to be a good movie.
To convert him. He's a pre-Vatican, or is a Vatican I Catholic, I think.
Well, he's a Sedevacanist, yeah.
Right.
So yeah, and we are the original Sedevacantists as Orthodox. So maybe eventually we can convert Mel Gibson. So pray for the conversion of Mel Gibson. But yeah, I think the resurrection movie does sound like a good idea.
I was bummed to hear. So him and Mark Wahlberg are doing a movie about a Roman Catholic priest in my town, and I was like, this is my chance because my Catholic just gets me into anything. I just introduce myself. Then I found out they're not filming in Montana. They're not even going to be up there.
Well, that's
so. I know I could have got them.
Well, I still have another contact in addition to my cousin. There's another coworker who actually works for him as his assistant. So So, there is a chance.
Tell him I'm looking for him.
I will.
Is there a problem? Your car didn't work. Anybody else? We got a full room here. Open chat.
Yeah, Jay, how's it going, bro?
Uh-oh. Here we go.
No. Oh, it's Dustin, dude.
Oh, hey, what's up, dude? You had that tone of like, you had that tone of like, I love you, but I hate you, right? Like, I'm about to destroy you, dude.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna roast you, Jay.
I love you, and I love your content, but like, let me explain why you're the worst human being on the planet right now.
It's like, you could win debates, Jay, if you could figure out your boomer tech and unmute your mic.
Ooh, roasted, bro. Burnt.
Roast. Anyways, this question is from Zhao. He says, how would you refute postmodernist thinkers like Umberto Eco and Derrida and their theories of semiotics against metaphysics?
I did a whole video on Eco, and Eco has a whole essay where he basically argues that the goal of the true leftist, and he's speaking in a general sense of like classical, what he sees as the history of all leftism, he says it's not a battle of liberals against a fascist regime. He says that the real battle and goal of the leftist is against truth, which is fascism in essence. So any notion that there's truth, Eco says, is fascism. And he says that's the real battle of the liberal, is against truth itself. Can't make this up. It's a famous essay. It's like the Fascist or the something like that by Eco. I highly recommend reading that essay because it really gives you an insight into the mindset of a person who was a committed rabid Thomist, who at some point in college or when it was, grad school, he realized that Thomism doesn't work. Thomism is a broken, dead-end system. And instead of going towards orthodoxy or something like that, Eco said, no, I'm going to be like the uber liberal. I'm going to go the demon satanic route, like literal Satanism. I mean, I think Eco was probably like totally into Luciferian. I've read most of his books, so I'm not saying this out of speculation. I mean, he fills his books with Gnostic, satanic, Luciferian, esoteric themes, especially if you read Foucault's Pendulum. He's basically defending the idea of, a satanic elite, more or less. And ultimately, of course, he's critiquing all of these things. He says, too, like, the idea of any kind of elite is absurd. So he kind of adopts this nihilistic, absurdist view that whether you're a Christian who believes in truth or whether you're this sort of Luciferian, Gnostic, Kabbalist, elitist, it's all absurdity. It's all nihilism. It's all just nothing. So you could read his books in that way, as if it's like cosmic nihilism. Maybe he's like that final stage of Father Seraphim Rose's book on nihilism. But regardless, Eco is a great example of the mature, spiritually, like, I'm saying darkly matured, like self-conscious evil that is like, our battle is against truth itself. Any notion that there's such a thing as truth is the real battle of the liberal. So you get that rare honesty in Umberto Eco's famous essay. So when we understand that that's the real motivation of a Derrida, of a Foucault, of a Eco, of the deconstructionists, now we understand that that's really what's going on here. And quite obviously, it's self-refuting. I mean, why are we're writing books using words and meaning to say books and words have no meaning? It's just fundamentally stupid. And they're okay with that, right? So postmodernists are okay with accepting nonsense, contradictions. There's no grand narratives. Okay, but that's a grand narrative. Okay, and if we're accepting contradictions and nonsense and chaos and meaninglessness, then you can't make arguments that nonsense and chaos and meaninglessness is true. So you've done your job as an apologist. And at a certain point, there's nothing that you can do with people like that. Like, you can't, if people are self-consciously, willfully wanting that level of evil, all you can do is pray for their repentance. I mean, there's like, that's self-conscious evil, right? So I hope that answers the question about echo. Anybody else?
Hey Jay, I have a question.
Sure.
When Filofsky talks about separated brethren,
Wait,
about the
who?
Protestants,
Who?
Filofsky,
Okay.
and I wonder what you think about that, and what does that mean with relation to, heterodox or people outside the church?
Right, so sometimes that word is used. I don't think it's necessarily always wrong. I mean, because you can have people who don't know all the issues, right? I mean, who aren't hardened in their heresy. They're not formal heretics, right? So I do agree that there is a patristic idea of somebody who is not a formal heretic, but is a material heretic, a heretic in potentia, you could say. And that's because heresy is usually defined as not a sin of just merely being wrong, but a sin of obstinacy. So a heretic is not somebody just wrong, because we're all wrong, right? So are we all heretics? Because I'm sure everybody's got some point in their theology wrong, right? So, but the sin of heresy and the sin of schism are sins of obstinacy, will, and knowledge. So you're knowingly, obstinately persisting in the error, in the heresy. There's not always a clear cut, like black and white in terms of every individual when a person's obstinately a heretic. So what we do from our vantage point is we don't try to go, person by person making specific judgments. We just do a judgment call on the group as a whole. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we're not condemning everybody as if we know their inner state or their heart. But what we do know is that at least before the end of a person's life, they have to be Orthodox. They have to believe and be united to the Orthodox faith. So if God somehow makes up for that, if God gives them a special means at the point of death or something like that, we don't know. But our job, our duty, is just like infants who die without baptism or outside the church. Do we know that they go to hell? No. We simply commend them to God, and we don't know their total end fate. But our job is to tell them and call them to orthodoxy. So at the time when the phrase separated brethren was used at Florence, that's used by St. Mark of Ephesus at the beginning of the council. There's a great article over at Orthodox Ethos that points out that by the end of the council, St. Mark of Ephesus realized that they're not separated brethren. They're heterodox. And you get the exact same expression in St. Gregory Palamas. He says that the Latins are heterodox. They listen to Satan. They're wrong. They're heresy. They're in heresy. But that doesn't mean that we have to go by every single person one by one and say, you're a damned heretic, you're a damn heretic, you're a damn heretic. We don't have to do that, because it's not our job to judge every individual person. It's rather a collective public judgment that we make about what they profess to believe, which is in error and is heresy. And God will deal with them on an individual level. We don't have to do that. That's why Paul says, what have we to do with judging those who are without? We judge those within. So it's much more pertinent to us to assess in the Orthodox Church who is and isn't Orthodox. We don't have to worry about what does Brother Billy Bob believe? What does Michael Lofton believe? They're heterodox, and God will deal with them. We don't have to. But it's important to point out that ecumenists misuse the phrase separated brethren, because after the council, St. Mark of Ephesus says they are not any more separated brethren. They are obstinate Latins, and they're stupid, and they're in heresy.
Okay, so God deals with each person according to what they've been given. And so if they haven't had the full revelation, the full truth, God will, lead them into truth in all possible means, and we don't have to worry about that.
That's what I would say. But we do have the duty, right? But it's just like evangelism, right? Like, we have the duty to tell people that you have to, come into the church, repent and believe, baptize all the nations, right? As Jesus says, the Great Commission. Now, we're not told what happens to people that die that never hear the gospel. We don't know. I mean, we're not told that. What we know is what we're told to do. That's all we know. I don't know. And one thing that is, I think, Orthodoxy helps you accept as you get older is that there's a reason why God doesn't tell us everything. So I'm perfectly fine with, like, I don't know. What happens to the guy who dies in, the pagan island who never heard the gospel? Well, I mean, unless God has a special means by which he joins that person to the church at the point of death or something like that, I mean, then we don't know. We're not told. But what we are told is that we have to preach and tell them to come into the kingdom.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody there? Hello, are you in there? Just not if you can hear me. It's like the wall up in the Discord, bro.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So it's a question about like veganism. So I just want to make it clear, I'm not a vegan. Like, I eat meat and stuff. Like, I have a question about just like the about arguments against vegans.
Okay.
So I know like there's a lot of examples throughout the Bible that eating meat is fine and stuff. Like the lamb is slain and stuff. Like, there's plenty of examples. But like, was it? I don't know if you know the answer to this, but was it the case that pre-fall state, like the Edenic state, eating animals or meat was a thing? Or is it just like the post-fall?
So there's a lot of people misunderstand this. Actually, you're correct. In Eden, nobody ate meat that we know of exactly. There's some debate over what the making skins means, but regardless, humans don't eat meat until Noah. So it's at Noah that God says, you may now eat meat. So presumably, we don't know what the wicked were up to. They might have been engaging in cannibalism for all we know. That might have been part of the reason why there was a flood. That's a lot of speculation. But for God's people, they're not told until Noah, Genesis 8-9, right, that now you may eat meat. So that's an allowance after the flood. And then if you read Acts 15, when the Gentiles are brought into the church, what happens is that the apostles have their council in Acts 15, and they say, okay, we're not going to require of Gentile converts anything more than was required in the covenant of Noah. Because if Noah, who was, obviously everybody knows, a Gentile, if he could be made righteous at that time, then we're not going to require anything more than was required of Noah for entering the covenant, so to speak. So all Acts 15 is a restatement of the Noahic covenant, which says, don't eat strangled meat, cook your food, right? Just basic principles like that. So yes, meat eating is allowable, not just because of Noah, but also in the New Testament. And then we get Paul saying to Timothy that false teachers will come along and they'll try to erect a fake morality and a fake ethical code by which they say that it's wrong to marry and it's wrong to eat flesh. So Gnostics, Ebionites, right? And within a few centuries, the early church fathers, the first of which is St. Hippolytus. He has a treatise on heresies, and he mentions the Brahmins. He says the Brahmins taught a doctrine of vegetarianism and not meeting meat, and so they would ethically enforce that it's morally wrong to eat meat. They are condemned. They're not just condemned there, they're condemned again in totality in some of the early councils, but also in St. John Damascus's book on heresies, where he lists 3 or 4 heretical sects. The Ebionites, the Pythagoreans, and 1 or 2 other groups, the Tatianites, Gnostics, Marcionites, different groups that would enforce vegetarianism, and it's unanimously, consistently condemned by the church fathers all across the board. And a lot of people don't know this too. Remember, everybody, veganism is an ethical position. It is not a diet-based position. So when the vegans are telling you that you have to be vegan, it's not about your diet. In fact, they know that it is not advantageous most of the time for humans to eat that goober stupid diet. And they tell you that it doesn't matter. Yes, it may be bad for your health, but you have a duty ethically to accept bad for your health things, because veganism is an ethical position, not a dietary position.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Jay.
Jay, I want to ask.
Yeah, just go ahead.
So again, Tristan, the attitude is that the food should be cooked. I'm not saying that it's always wrong to eat sushi. I think the attitude of why the food is to be cooked is because of the ancient world's attitude towards what might make you sick. So yes, I'm sure that plenty of people eat rare food or eat sushi. I don't think that Acts 15 is implying that it's always wrong to eat sushi. But
more about blood. If you look at the prescription, for example, of the Council of Gangra, which you mentioned against these people, it's more about blood, and there's this thing, blood pudding, blood sausage, and so on. Many parts of the Orthodox world would not be permitted, and it's this link with, St. James is he's a president of the Council of Acts 15, and he's a very sacerdotal figure. So it might also be referring to the idea that since, we are becoming divine, in a sense, by consuming divine blood, as a recognition of our consumption of divine blood, we would give the exclusivity of our blood consumption to Christ, to divine blood.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Also mentioned specifically, like when they talk about uncooked food, it's always about blood.
Right. So, Tristan, I'm not trying to counter signal you, but I would disagree that I think that the implication is that it is supposed to be cooked, because there is in Levitical law the prohibiting of eating raw flesh. So, yes, it's true that Acts 15 doesn't specifically say you must cook the meat, but it's already presupposed in the way that they're approaching the question. So, and again, it's not a legalistic thing that you can never have something like sushi. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But like Sneck said, it has oftentimes been understood in that way. So,
a quick question. I was just wondering, what is some of the basic terminology, like in general, for that you need to know for Christology and Trinitarian theology?
Well, there's a good book by Vladimir Losky called Dogmatic Theology, and he has basically a pretty useful glossary at the back of the book where he defines kind of the basic ideas of hypostasis and nature and energies and this kind of stuff. So that would be a good kind of rough book, but the basics would be, I think David has some videos too, David the Real Medwhite, on the basic terms that you want to know, but person, nature, energy, will, tropos, mode, right, the inhypostatize, those are all key words that we want to know.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Jay, I had a quick one. It was something that came up on Twitter.
Go ahead.
It's about Saint Basil. I just want you to comment real quick, because now the Reformed, in their terrible arguments against us, are now trying to claim several Saint Basil's letters we have, like letter 360, are forgeries.
I don't know off the top of my head what the 360 is. Now, some of Basil's letters have been thought to be Gregory of Nyssa, like letter 38 is on nature and person is now believed to be Gregory of Nyssa, but I don't, what exactly does that, I mean, who cares what a Reformed person thinks? And what is letter number 360? I don't know off the top of my head what it is. Are you there?
Excuse me? Oh, it's the letter from St. Basil talking about iconography, because, they're iconoclasts, so they're trying to argue that any patristic evidence for venerating icons has to be forgery. Okay,
well, everybody doubts there's plenty of people who doubt the authenticity of the Epiphanius essay against iconography. So it doesn't really matter if our argument for and belief in iconography doesn't hinge on a letter from Basil. I mean, it hinges on the principle behind the incarnation, the real presence in the Eucharist, sacramentalism. I mean, that's the basis for why we believe that icons, do what they do. It's not all hinging on, a letter from Basil.
Yeah, may I just chime in?
Sure. So, yeah.
If you're looking for a critical perspective, there's always going to be some level of criticism. Now, this letter is really on its face in terms of iconography, because it literally says that he venerates icons. if you want to prove iconography from Saint Basil, I would maybe be a bit careful. I would not use stuff that they might refuse or they might debate, because there's always some level. If you're in a critical mindset, there's always a way in which you wouldn't use it. So if you want to prove iconography from Saint Basil, you can use many of his letters when he refers to glory given to the type being transferred to the prototype, and we've got all of these ideas. So it's talking about the Trinity, but you can show that there's a principle here, and I think there's also something from him talking about the image of the emperor, in order to
it passes the
sense. So I think that instead of using this one, which can be debated, and I understand why it can be debated, because it seems very obvious, and there are some that are, there are some actually, I know there's a fake quote by Athanasius on icons, but instead of using this one, you can show that actually Saint Basil already understood the principle of iconography and actually applied it to his Trinitarian theology. And now the Seventh Council is just doing that in reverse, which is just a natural return to source. But if you want to go from a full-on church perspective, then you'll be a bit less critical. But if you're talking to Protestant, please accept that they can have some criticism. We also have some criticism of some documents in other contexts,
Yeah, I mean, they always pick it. They just do this game where they quote mine to find a church father who disagreed at some point. Okay, but so what? What does that prove? Because nobody is hinging the position on every church father having a unanimous agreement at every stage. I mean, there wouldn't be councils if everybody agreed, right? So it really doesn't matter. And Sneck's right that I wouldn't hinge the argument on a dubious letter. I would just point out the principles that the Seventh Council uses. If you read St. Theodore's book on the holy icons, he uses the argument like type prototype that Sneck just mentioned.